Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to Regional Arts New South Wales, the Country Air. The Country Air is presented by Regional Arts New South Wales, and it's a monthly online discussion panel on the key issues facing arts and culture in regional Australia. The Country Air aims to directly engage with people living and working in regional New South Wales and beyond across Australia. Today is Wednesday, the 14th of June. It's 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, the ACT, Northern Territory, I think, as well. And so my name is Dr. Sally Blackwood, and I'm your host for this afternoon's Country Air panel, Keep Us Thriving. It's about mental health and the arts in regional New South Wales. At this point, I'd like to offer a little note, a little trigger warning that today's conversations may contain difficult subject matter regarding mental ill health and perhaps even talk of suicide. So if any point in time, if the conversation is too much, please feel free to leave and to look after you. Or at any time, please, you can contact Beyond Blue on 1300 22 46 36 or Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Support Act on 1800 959 500. And for First Nations friends, please feel free to call the Support Act First Nations support line on 13 Yarn or at 1800 959 500 option 3. Today I'm calling in from Gadigal country to audio describe myself. I'm sitting in a room, it's fairly nondescript white wall. I'm dressed in white, I have pale skin and blonde-ish hair. It's all a bit monochrome here. A little bit of housekeeping to start. We're recording this series so that audiences will be able to access the discussion online after the event. So if you don't wish to be filmed, obviously turn your videos off, which a few people have already done. But if you do feel comfortable, it's really, really nice to see everyone's faces and feel like we're talking to a group of people. We encourage participation, so invite you to please add your questions and comments to the chat box. The icon is located at the bottom of your screen. And please feel free to jump on now if you haven't done so already and say which country you're dialing in from. Managing the chat box is our wonderful Dr. Tracy Callanan, OAM. Can I just say, congratulations, Tracy, the Regional Arts New South Wales CEO. And she's going to feed questions and chat summary at intervals this afternoon. The panel session will run for an hour and conclude New South Wales time at 3 o'clock. So in a moment, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panellists and then kick off the discussion with some prepared questions. Before I do, and before I introduce you to all our speakers and lead you through the conversation, I would like to ask one of our panellists, Cerisa Benjamin, to conduct our acknowledgement of country. Cerisa.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you all for joining in. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which I am on, the Arrernte people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Also acknowledge them for taking care of this land for more than 60,000 years. And I also want to extend that acknowledgement to all the lands that you guys are joining on today. Thank you.
Thanks, Cerisa. So let's meet the panel. Cerisa, who you've just heard from, is a First Nations program lead at Support Act. She's a proud Warlpiri, Gurindji and Jawoyn woman, born and raised in Katherine in the NT. And then she went to Melbourne to follow her passion in the music industry and the mental health space, thriving in her role at Support Act. Cerisa has seen increased engagement of First Nations people in music accessing Support Act services. And she's been responsible for Support Act to become more culturally sensitive and inviting to First Nations people in music. As well as this, Cerisa has also produced 14 shows for First Nations people in music with Bar Padilla Foundation, and she's currently managing Cootsie Don, an up-and-coming rap artist. In 2021, Cerisa started Yarning Strong, which is a mental health and wellbeing events for First Nations music workers and a webinar series co-hosted with Mitch Tambo. Welcome, Cerisa. Aimee Davies is our founding director of Aimee, and Aimee started in sound engineering before embarking on a varied career through the creative industries, including the opening of a creative space. Aimee found that there was a real lack of creative industry experienced medical practitioners to offer preventative and proactive solutions to the challenges that her peers were facing. She then moved into the health sector, so community services, integrated therapy, and working with young people who have experienced complex trauma, and then graduated as a registered counsellor. Aimee's now combined her therapeutic skills and her creative industry experience to create the Aimee project. And I'll get her to talk about this in a minute, to offer support to the creative industries, providing industry and vocation-specific thinking, support that's accessible, proactive, preventative, educational, and industry-informed. Welcome, Aimee. And our third panellist is Stuart O'Neill. He's the author of Just One Reason, and he's the founder of Australia's first mental health pub. Stuart was raised in Melbourne, and his self-employment life has provided its fair share of highs and lows, very much like the arts, I imagine. Stuart first became an Australian surf lifesaver in the 1980s, and it's passion that he still fulfills to this day. And his desire to save lives now includes the book Just One Reason, a suicide prevention toolkit and a product of his own out-of-the-box thinking. The book reveals Stuart's own strategy for beating his and our inner demons and offers a powerful and very easy solution to a world problem that he says is getting worse, not better. In September 2022, Stuart opened the doors of the first mental health pub in Deepwater, New South Wales, to demonstrate that to government that alternative models can work. At the 180-day mark, there were more than 1,000 mental health conversations, new community groups established, and multiple suicide preventions. Welcome, Stuart, and welcome to all our panel. So the discussion, Keep Us Thriving, Mental Health and the Arts in Regional New South Wales. We're here to discuss experiences, programs, strategies in combating mental ill health and disconnecting communities, alongside sharing stories of wellbeing and thriving. I'm going to ask the first key question to you, Stuart. What is good mental health and wellbeing?
Thanks, Sally. Hi, everyone. Thank you. And I've had 10 minutes to think about this question, and actually I feel like it's an enormous question. And I've been trying to think of how I'd summarize this, because what's good mental health is to one person might be different to another. For me, good mental health is being aware of my mental health, is understanding whether I'm having a good day or a bad day, what sort of things trigger me to have a bad day. And so for me, that's sort of how I relate to that question, I guess, is because it's such a diverse sort of type of answer that I could give you. And I think also, you know, I see that in other people as well, is that when another person knows what causes them to have bad mental health, it's like, don't self-sabotage. If you know that sort of stuff affects you greatly, then do less of it. And for me, that's, I guess, my answer is just I fully understand when I'm having bad mental health. And for myself, like I go horizontal and I go silent. And so going flat, laying in bed, doing nothing, and being true to that is really helps my mental health.
Thanks, Stuart. It's a really beautiful personal reminder that, yeah, it's about awareness and triggers. Thank you. Aimee, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, Stuart's on when he talks about the fact that poor mental health is when we do notice those triggers and ourselves withdrawing from community, or those things that we generally do when we have positive mental health. So, you know, the World Health Organization describes mental health in regards to a state of living a fruitful life. So it's actually about the things that are going well in our lives rather than things that are going wrong in our lives. We can often think about mental health as in a really negative context. And I think Stuart's answer is a clear demonstration of this. It's actually, you know, when we notice the real positive things in our lives starting to slowly withdraw, we can really notice our decline in mental health and where perhaps we are on our mental health journey, and potentially, you know, if we are living with a mental illness as well, where we are with that journey as well. So, you know, that could like potentially look like Stuart was saying, you know, you might go horizontal and withdraw from daily life. It could be withdrawing from social commitments. You might not be sleeping as much. If you're sort of experiencing more poor mental health, as creatives, this is the creative panel, so our ability to access flow and our I guess willingness and eagerness to access that more creative side of ourselves actually slips away as well. So depending on where we are within our mental health journey. So yeah, so I'd say mental health is a state of living a fruitful life, and one that is, I guess, authentic to ourselves and activities that we thrive in. Obviously, our introverted selves probably require less social activity than our more extroverted selves. But yeah, I would say it's a state of, you know, where we are in our lifestyle and I guess, what are we maintaining? What are we losing? And then in turn, what are we recognizing amongst ourselves? Are we feeling isolated? Are we feeling lonely? Are we feeling a sense of depression, or are we feeling a depressed or anxious mood? And then, you know, if that is something that goes on longer than, you know, a couple of weeks, and then that's something that potentially we need to reach out for some serious support for it as well. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Thanks, Aimee. Cerisa, what for you is good mental health and wellbeing?
For me, good mental health and wellbeing would probably, I'm just going to probably kind of echo what Stuart and Aimee were saying. It's a trigger that you have, that you've experienced. So everyone experiences their own traumas in different types of way. It's understanding what those triggers and traumas are, and then getting the tools on how to deal with those traumas. So good mental health for me would be awareness of what your triggers are, and then how you can deal with those triggers in a good and healthy manner.
Thank you. Aimee, what is it then to thrive? You mentioned thriving. What does that take?
Yeah, it's sort of a bit of a question of, you know, how long is a piece of string? Like, what is thriving for everyone? And you know, Cerisa and Stuart were bang on when they're saying it's different for everyone as well. But I would describe thriving as when we are sort of maintaining all the aspects of our lives that we need to maintain positive mental health. So in a sense of connection, now that doesn't have to be physical as well. You know, we're talking about regional arts here, so there's definitely a difference between you know, isolation and connection. We can feel incredibly connected to people, but incredibly isolated remotely, and vice versa as well. Activities in regards to creative activities, so it could be something that's monetized for ourselves, but also a hobby that's outside of something that we monetize can be really beneficial for our mental health and allow us to thrive and play and explore, and also access that action of flow, which is really lovely. You know, it doesn't have to be something that you're professional at. It can just be something to play at. I tried punch needling a couple of months ago and I was terrible, but I really enjoyed the process. You know, eating and sleeping, a sense of safety physically, emotionally, financially. So there's a lot of different aspects of our lives that we maintain, look after, in order to thrive, and sometimes we can be thriving in one area and not so much another. And and there's also other things in there as well, like a sense of identity. And Cerisa could probably provide more information around this, but particularly with culture and things like that as well. So there's a lot of different aspects we need in our lives to maintain positive mental health, but also allow ourselves to thrive as well.
Yeah, thanks, Aimee. There's some beautiful reminder of flow and play and explore, which I think really resonates across the arts. Safety as well, which I think we might circle back to a little bit in a minute. Cerisa, can you tell me a little bit more for you in terms of thriving? Is it about people? Is it about places? Is it about strategies? What are your thoughts?
Thriving for me, in particular as a First Nations person, is when I'm in a supportive environment. So it's good to be in an environment that you feel that you can grow, but also learn in. You can make mistakes, and that's okay. And it's good when you're really supported. So for me and for everyone, I would say as well, just being in a supportive environment that helps you thrive and grow. And then also, just understanding the environment around you as well. For me, yeah.
Thank you. Just a bit more of a background of where each of these amazing panellists are coming from. Aimee, can you tell me a little bit more about Aimee, if you're able to this afternoon? Who's it for and what does it offer?
Yeah, of course. So Aimee is a social enterprise that was started at the end of 2019 by myself. There was myself, a psychologist friend, and another counsellor. And essentially, after sort of working in the arts for 15 years, the word is multidisciplinary, I'm now learning, but, jack of all trades, master of none. And then sort of having my clinical experience and understanding, I saw that there was a real gap, I guess, for preventative, proactive support, but I guess sort of beyond the fantastic work that like Support Act do and Arts Wellbeing Collective, but more so sort of ongoing support rather than crisis helplines, things like that. So what Aimee do is we deliver mental health and wellbeing support and education in the creative industry. So we work across all creative industries, whether you're a puppeteer, a performing artist in music, and we work across 3 different levels. So we work with individuals, we work with community members where we get to jump on and do things like this, talks. We were in our final weeks of the regional creative wellbeing program with Regional Arts Australia as well. And then we also work with workplaces and organisations to create mentally healthy workplaces that are creative industry specific. And all of our team have lived experience in the creative industry. So we do lots of different things, from workshops, talks, and then one-on-one counselling and psychology services as well remotely. So we might live and work remote as creatives, but we also, when we're working, a lot of our time we're transient, so we're traveling. So to have that consistent support is really important. I was going to say something else, but it escaped me. But essentially, because we're a social enterprise, what happens is the profits from the work that we do, particularly with our larger organisational partners, are reinvested into Aimee, so then we can subsidise our services for community members and individuals for low or no cost as well. So so it's a place that I wish I had when I was, a young adult, trying to navigate this thing that we call the creative industries and the arts. And I think if it was around, my journey might have been a little bit different. So that's a little bit about Aimee and what we do.
Thank you. It's been great to see Aimee rolling out with Regional Arts Australia and everything you've been doing online. It's been really fascinating to have a look at, and obviously the mental health first aid courses that you offer. So everyone can just jump online and look at Aimee Project to get more information. Is that the best way to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's online
Thanks.
now.
That's awesome.
Sorry, thank you.
Stuart, I have to ask, what's a mental health hub? We want to know. How does it work, and what was your aim, and is it happening? Tell us all about your mental health pub.
Okay, well, where can I start with this? So I guess the brainchild of all just came out of probably just being a bit disillusioned with how government is with their funding and big business, and a lot of people. I found it's tokenism, that they have a mental health statement or something within their organisation, but they don't actually live and breathe it. They just have it because someone in another department said you need to have this on your website or on your brochures and things. And then I've had the luxury in the last few years, because of my book, that I've been exposed everywhere to high-level government departments, you know, really large not-for-profits, and get to talk all manner of things, nitty-gritties and things. And so I continually see a waste of money and not going to where it's really needed and not being used. You know, that if you give a person who has no money $10, and the value that they can extract out of that $10 might be $30, then if you give $10 to a large corporation, they might only be able to get the benefit of 50 cents out of it. So I guess I feel a lot of that thriftiness is not widespread. And so opening up a hotel was sort of a bit of a way for me to say, watch this, to the whole sector, and say, if one person can afford to do this, what could a government department do with 1 billion times my money, so to speak? So Deepwater was chosen for a few reasons. One, because it was cheap, and two, because it was in New South Wales. And since COVID, I realised, you know, what if we're going to do this, we need to do it in the state that I live in, so that I can get back to my house or not have any stupid government sanctions imposed on us for right near the border, which is where I used to live. So that became the choice of location. And so some of the subtle things that we've done, for example, just thinking about answering some of these questions now. So I had all these. I don't know if you can see that. It's a bit of art there, creative. I'm actually a bit more creative than some people think. So I had a whole series of these sorts of things done. And like this one here, this is...
Are they cards, Stuart? Cards?
Yeah, so these were all done as original art pieces, but I've had them turned into cards and posters. And one of these days I meant to sell the cards. I've got a lot of cards. And but all of these sorts of things are around our pub. So in the toilets, where people are like promoting what's the next event and different things, in our pool table area, our darts area, in our toilets and different areas, we've got mental health posters like this all around, as opposed to most pubs are going to have a VB sign and a 2 is new sign. And then we've got, you know, support numbers listed around the place. And then I wish I could take you for a quick little walk into our lounge area. I might be able to, yeah, if you want, I'll try, and if I can show a photo, this might just, you know, when they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I'll see if I can quickly find this without hogging the camera for too long. Is our whole pub has been set up like with a few little strategies in place that help create interaction. So instead of just being thinking as a pub with a traditional bar, which it has got one of those, it's also got some really comfortable places where you can sit and chat. And I think when people come in here, they feel like they've come into my house as opposed to coming into a pub. It feels really cozy. So there is a photo in here, and I'll be really, really fast. I'm multitasking. So here's some of the things. Okay, I'll see if this comes up. Can anyone see that? Oh, I'm pointing to show to everyone. I only have to hold in the same spot. So there's a long table. And so our table seats 37 people. And when we reopened the hotel the locals hated it, some still do, because they want to have a table for 2 or a table for 4. And so what's happened is it forced interaction. So we have like a chef's table once a month, and anyone can come to a dinner party. And so then all of a sudden you can come on your own, but now you're not on your own. And you never know who you're going to get to sit next to. And mental health's just about having a conversation with anyone. So we've got all these like little sort of strategies in place which just bring people together that haven't met before. And some people have been to 2 and 3 chef's tables, and now they've got friends that they've established from that chef's table. So there's a few bits and pieces that we wanted to just show. All this stuff is no cost. It doesn't actually really cost anything to put those posters around and make different choices. And having my book on the counter where our cafe part is, it sends a message pretty clearly that people ask constantly when they're getting coffee, what's all this stack of books? And we're like, great question. And so we launch into a mental health thing, and the things that people reveal really, really quickly when they realize that we're compassionate towards mental health is it's phenomenal that the conversations just flowed like instantly, like within, I think from memory, Sally, it was about day 3 of us opening. So as a visual, it's an ugly brick country hotel. Looks like it was built in the 70s or 80s. So it's been a bit of a job to try and make it look a bit presentable. So we put a hole in the wall cafe along the main path, and the window pops out in the morning, and now the pub is open for coffee from 8 o'clock. And part of that, this is a long answer, is we knew that if we only sold beer, we'd only talk to this much of the community. So by putting coffee in, we increased the likelihood that we could talk to other residents in the community who don't want to just consume alcohol. And I'm pretty sure it was day 3, but a tow truck driver pulled up to get a coffee and asked about the books. And it just so happened that was the 8th year anniversary for him having lost his son that day. And so all of a sudden he felt comfortable enough to share that story. He came inside, had his coffee inside, we talked for 10 minutes, and you could just feel like someone had lifted 10 tons of bricks off his shoulder, because it was a shit day for him. No one's ever going to wake up and look forward to that particular anniversary. But now he had someone that he could talk to and have a bit of a debrief to. And it was like, by day 3, I'm like, yeah, we're on the right money here with what we're doing, because where else can you go and do that on that particular day? So there's 2 more hours of answer here. So that's sort of where we wanted to be, is just to go, there's alternative models out there, and it starts with discussion. And so we wanted to make it easy for people to discuss, and it's happened. It's like a tsunami has hit us here from local residents, men and women. Children come to us, all sorts of different things. We expected it, but we didn't expect it to be in the volume that it's in. So we're pretty happy with the momentum that we've changed within the town already in like 6 short months.
Thanks, Stuart. That's really incredible. And
No worries.
for the personal story too, because that's where it really hits home. And yeah, we could talk all day. I'm just going to jump to Cerisa for a moment, because I'd love to hear about, Cerisa, what you're doing with Yarning Strong, and if you can talk a little bit to that and the changes that you've been making.
Yeah, so I might give a little bit of a background as well. So I grew up in the Northern Territory in Katherine. In the First Nations community, there's a lot of drug and alcohol abuse. There's just a lot of mental health issues within the community, especially where I grew up in, and a lot of First Nations people up Northern Territory or up the north are living in third world conditions. So I started my journey actually in child protection, and I was working with mainly First Nations children, and I just saw how the system wasn't kind of handling it appropriately and in a culturally appropriate way, and just a lot of degrading and a lot of there was no understanding, no compassion. So I was in that space for a little bit. I've got my diploma in social work, and then I was like, no, this is not what I want to do, not the space that I want to be in. And I wanted to move more into an empowering space, and just giving voice to life experiences, and giving a platform to voices, First Nations voices. How I landed in the music industry, it was an interesting story. But I firstly started doing events, and music has been a part of First Nations culture for thousands of years. And so it kind of fits well. I've always loved music. I wanted to be a singer myself, but I just never got the opportunity where I was living. So I kind of went into the event space. And then from there, I found Support Act. And I thought, wow, this is perfect. I'm really interested in mental health. I think it's so important for us to speak about our mental health and address it. And I loved music as well. So it was like both of my passions combined. And then I went into the Support Act space. And I just noticed in the music industry, people are the good thing about being in the music industry and the arts industry is people are very open to hearing stories. And even though there's a lot of compassion and understanding and empathy, there was a lack of knowledge in that space. And because there's a lack of knowledge, a lot of people were really hesitant to engage with a lot of First Nations people. And I find that today as well, because there's so much trauma, there's a barrier there to have a free-flowing conversation without feeling like you're stepping on someone's toes. So what I did was I created kind of an environment in Support Act where First Nations people could come, have those discussions, have those conversations within a safe space within Yarning Strong, but also ensuring that it's not overly triggering. I always have to bring the conversation back and bring out the positives, because there's so many positives in First Nations community, yet we hear so many negatives, and we hear so many things that create more barriers to have conversation. And so part of Yarning Strong was breaking down that barriers and having those conversations. I'm studying psychology because I want to come out of that kind of heavy space and come into a more motivational space, because I do see a lack of just that positive reinforcements, that positive talk, that positive self-talk. And that's where I see a lot of lacking in the First Nations community. So I am studying my psychology degree, and I do want to do more in the First Nations space in regards to just bringing a more positive outlook. But yeah, currently with Yarning Strong, that was kind of the aim that I was going towards for that one.
Thanks, Cerisa. It's beautiful. And Yarning Strong is an amazing webinar series, and you and your host are just quite extraordinary. So that's amazing that you've provided that space. Just thinking about spaces, and I love you talking about empowering spaces and voices to life experience. And I'm just going to go slightly off, but I was just thinking, Stuart, of an anecdote that you told me about your space. An arm wrestle anecdote that you told me. I was wondering if you could talk about that. I just think in terms of creating spaces.
Okay. Yeah. So last year I got invited through a friend to go to an arm wrestling tournament. Growing up, I guess as a male, you always have a fancy self and you enjoy having arm wrestlings with friends and family and all that sort of stuff. And so this event was actually far larger than I ever anticipated. It's like 1,000 people there, all these crazy big blokes arm wrestling and whatnot. And apart from the entertainment of being there, what I observed was that all these men actually had high respect and almost love for each other. And so the main thing, what do you call it? The main event finished. There was the winner and all that sort of standard stuff. And then I don't know if anyone's ever visualized what happens after a game of football. Like little kids like to go onto the field afterwards and have kicks at goals and kick the ball around and things. Well, a similar thing happened with the arm wrestling, is that everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people wanted to go up to the arm wrestling tables and meet the arm wrestlers that had won and put their arm on the table and have all this sort of stuff. And to see these giant men to be so patient with novices, young and old, and different males and things, like they were competitors fiercely for maybe 40 seconds. And then as soon as the 40 seconds were over, they were like embracing, hugging each other, acknowledging each other. There was not 1 ounce of aggression in the place. And all I saw was really, really, really good mental health in the room. And so I already had the idea of what was happening, what was coming with the hotel. So I quickly scouted around the room and spoke to who's the event promoter, who's this person, who's that person, how do we get hold of this person, and contacted them all and said, we're going to recreate this event out in Deepwater this year. And, you know, everyone was really, really polite and nice and all the rest of it, and didn't think that it was ever going to happen. And it did. So, you know, I flew an athlete or a competitive arm wrestler person in from New Zealand, and we managed to track down the Australian winner. And then we got the same commentator, and then a whole lot of things. It was a really, really crazy recreation. And so I put that on because pubs have a traditional type thing where they're betting on horses and blokes are swearing and yelling and other sorts of things. And so I wanted to create an event that was completely left field and, you know, which ties in with arts and things. And the exact same thing happened on the night as it happened back at the Australian Championships. As soon as the event was over, 15-year-old kids wanted to get up and as a visual, like that one of the main guys is 170 kilos and 6'4" or 6'5". He's like a seriously large man. And they all wanted photos with him, and women wanted photos with him, and kids wanted photos with him, and all these big guys were there. And they were just the most gentle giants ever. And so I think the main aspect of the show probably was all over in 30 minutes. And then I'd say the next after the show went on for at least another 2 hours. People on the tables, arm wrestling, embracing each other, supporting each other. It's like it was identical to what I'd witnessed. So I was really, really pleased to go. There's actually mental health sport that you can bring to a pub, as opposed to two blokes going out the back and wanting to have a biff or other things that people would expect to see at a hotel. We completely came from left field and just tacking into the left field. Sally, it was only 2 weeks ago we shut the pub on a Tuesday night, which most people go, why would you ever shut a hotel, because you're meant to be open to trade? And we had a sound healing circle with chanting. And we had 14 people here, and some amazing things happened. People couldn't believe that you could shut the pub down. We set up all the chairs around the big fireplace, and we had a full meditation healing session with an amazing chanting fellow. And people that came, we just can't believe it. It's like, well, how's this happening in a bush hotel? It's pretty alternative, but it worked a treat. Like the stories that came out throughout the night was just fantastic.
The ripple effect of what you've started and now are continuing on is quite extraordinary, Stuart. Thank you for sharing that arm wrestling one. For me, it's very much the arts is about events and it's about social cohesion. When we talk a lot about that, about the gathering of people and the importance of that. And I found that something that was outside of my field, like arm wrestling, could also create this incredibly empowered space for people. I just thought that was really fascinating. And now sound healing, that's really, it's amazing. It's really
I don't have any short answers either, sorry.
No, but it's all alternate models. So I think it's really, really interesting. I'm just going to, the role of spaces is really important, and the role of community is also incredibly important, of not perhaps having to do this by ourselves. Cerisa, how have you found the role of community is important in terms of good or mental health and wellbeing for an individual?
I think it's super important. I started reading a book called Atomic Habits. I'm sure you guys have heard of all of that. But part of those creating good habits is being surrounded by community and by an environment that you can thrive in. And it's interesting because when Stuart was talking, I was just thinking about community and coming together, and how in a First Nations community, in a space, there's a lot of mental health. So when I help someone in a community, it's very hard for them to go to anyone else because everyone's struggling with mental health, and quite significant and severely. So with my own journey, I actually had to go outside of my community to be able to thrive and grow. And so what happened was, when I was living in Catherine, a lot of my family, they've got a lot of mental health there as well, my dad and everyone. And this is kind of why I really super passionate about this space, because I think the First Nations community need it, needed a lot, but they need to have First Nations representatives there to be able to guide and lead that. Someone from an understanding of that background, I think, is super important. But I found that when I went outside of my community and I went down to Melbourne, and the community there, they didn't suffer from mental health. I mean, they probably did in some sort of capacity, but not as severely as what my community was suffering and dealing with. And they actually had the tools to be able to, a few people had the tools to be able to get through that. And so going outside of my community, going into a community that was really supportive, I found was great. And sometimes it's all about finding a space where you fit. And even though I am in a First Nations space and I am a First Nations person, sometimes that space can get really heavy for me. And so I need to pull myself out of that space, give myself a moment to just realign, align myself with people that are kind of going the direction that I want to go and that I want to head, and be in a different kind of community that is aware of their mental health and is looking out for their mental health. And then by having the support of that community, I then can help another community that really needs my support as well. So I think community and coming together is so important. My husband as well, Stuart's reminding me of my husband because he works in hospitality, and he owned a cafe on Flinders Street in Melbourne, and he just had people coming into the cafe, and he's the type of person that loves bringing people together, and people were just walking into his cafe and having a coffee, or not even having a coffee, and just standing there because they loved the environment, they loved the conversation, and they felt good when they walked into his shop. So having a space such as a mental health hub, I think, is amazing and really progressive in where you're headed, Stuart, because you link a pub and you think, oh, pub, that's like bad news, alcohol, and there's so many things that happen in that space, yet it can be actually quite a transformative moment, depending on the area that you go in, the community that you go into, and the connection that you can make within that community.
Thanks, Cerisa. Cerisa, I have to get you to tell Stuart about that beer that you were telling me about, that First Nations beer sober, which sounds awesome. Stuart, there's a non-alcoholic beer to add to your menu.
None. And the amazing thing is the founder is an Aboriginal psychologist. So,
Oh, wow. I'd certainly like to hear about that.
and I heard you're selling coffees. My husband, he started a coffee and tea business. It's called Black Brews. So if anyone's interested, head to Black Brews, and it's an Indigenous tea business that has infused Indigenous ingredients. So
Wow, absolutely. Black Brews.
And sober beer, put it on the menu. That's great. Awesome. Thanks, Cerisa. Yeah, these empowering spaces, and it's really beautiful to hear about alternate models. And thank you, Cerisa, for raising that about the pub and alcohol, and because it could very well be feel dangerous or feel not the safe space. And obviously, from what you're saying, Stuart, it very much is, but it's really good to have that difficult conversation to unpack that about what it can be. And obviously, Stuart, it's now been since September last year, is that right?
Yes, yeah, September last year is when it all started. Is alcohols and mental health. It's a really controversial subject, and we've proven time and time again that there's no doubt that alcohol can have a negative impact on people. That's beyond question. I think there's a lot of people that immediately associate that alcohol is mental health, and there's advantages to also mental health and alcohol coming together. As you know, sometimes some bloke might not say a word, but after 2 beers, he finally feels a bit lubricated in the sense that he's going to open up. And so it doesn't mean that alcohol is that you have to be drunk. Is you can come into a pub and you can have a glass of water, you can have a can of Coke, you can have a beer, you can have a coffee. It's like a hotel is like traditionally for a long period of time, is it sold all manners of liquids, not just beer. And so I think we're showing more and more of that. Some of the things that like Cerisa was just mentioning with the coffee shop, where I first came across this, sorry, I had a hole in the wall cafe at the front of an airport a long time ago. And I discovered that there was a lot of homeless people living near the airport, and they were in suits. And so the reason why they were in suits is that they could hang out in the airport and not be noticed. And so they wanted to blend into the community. So I really started to see how coffee and mental health, and that's how far back this idea of having a hotel one day goes. And, you know, people trust baristas, and they trust hairdressers, and they trust bar people, and they talk to us before they'll talk to a lot of other people. And so they might not feel judged. So hearing about what your husband's doing, that I can fully relate to, and I think I know where that shop was as well. So I can fully relate to that's how it is. It all starts in conversation. That's like step one, is talking.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've got a question that's been on my mind for a while about beyond talking, and there's a little bit, and I'll ask you about this, Aimee, if just about embodiment and how possibly is it all, I guess the question is it all about talking, or how does the body perhaps play a role in mental health and wellbeing? And if this isn't the question for you, please pass it on to one of the others or pass it back to me.
No, it's a fantastic question. I was just thinking, like which part do I start with? Yeah, and I mean, mental health isn't just the mind, it's about the mind-body connection as well. You know, I danced from 4 to 18, and having that sort of regular movement in my body was something that I didn't realize, you know, actually helped me maintain a really positive state of mental health, particularly with stressful situations and periods in life, until I stopped dancing. And And then I realized that I needed some sort of physical outlet to, I guess, help maintain those sorts of strenuous times, of stress. I also think, movement can also be extended beyond, we're talking about safe places and community and all those sorts of things. And I think movement's a massive part of community and maintaining positive mental health, particularly in rural and regional places. My partner's from a small town in New South Wales of 4,000 people. And, movement within that particular town is massive, football clubs, netball clubs, the theatre club, all those places where people can connect. And it's not always about the physical activity of whether you're running or playing netball or moving your body in a creative manner, but it's about that release that you get while you're doing it, and giving yourself, I guess, that break mentally from the day and being able to, I guess, come back down to baseline again. So yeah, I guess that's probably the first thing that sort of came into my mind when we were talking about mind-body embodiment and what that sort of means and how it can, almost reset or really provide some clarity and release from our sort of mind. And I guess it does all really link into, community and connection and things like that, depending on where we find our movement as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Aimee. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's about community groups as well as personally moving through space.
I have something to add to that, Sally.
Please jump in.
In psychology, in what I'm studying, they actually say that your gut health impacts your mental health. So it's really important as well to have a good diet, a good balanced diet, because that can impact the way that you think and the way that you view life itself. So it's really interesting.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's great to hear you studying that too. That's awesome. Now, I haven't jumped to the audience for questions. I don't think there's been anything sitting there. Tracy, am I right? So, yeah, we're good. All right. We've got just about 5 minutes to the end, and I'd just love to throw back to the panel just for some wrap-up words that you would like to say, anything that you would like to end on. Stuart, do you want to jump in first?
Just trying to think. I think the value, like in things like today, is that we get to talk to people that we wouldn't normally get to talk to, and there's just always a common thread, and somehow or another things link up between everyone that's sitting here today. So I enjoy that, and just think the more of these, the better. Like, whether 1,000 people listen to this or 10,000 people listen to this, any person that listens to this will get something out of it. So I just think every little bit just all contributes to helping everyone's situation. And even me, like, I like hearing that other people have done like what Cerisa's done, and hearing other stories and things. It's like, it just gives me confirmation that collectively we're all on the right track.
Thank you. Yeah, the common threads throughout is really interesting, and especially when you come from such different spaces. It's really interesting. Aimee, do you want to add to that or say some of your own words?
Yeah, I think Stuart's right on the money when he says that it's all very interlinked, and the things that we've discussed, although some are very, very profound, there are also things that ideally we should have access to, and that providing spaces for connection and appropriate support for us and things like that. It's stuff that should be accessible and really doesn't need to be groundbreaking, I guess, when we're talking about connection and community and safe places to hold conversations, if it's a coffee shop or your local pub. and then I guess also within that our culturally appropriate places as well. But I guess it's that I know when we are not feeling our best, the last thing we want to do is sit down and think, what do I feel like doing right now? Do I feel like moving my body? Do I feel like going to have a coffee? So even making a list of the things that, you know, that we do that make us feel good, and putting it somewhere nice and safe on our phone, on the fridge, on your laptop, wherever. So when you are in those sort of low periods, you do sort of look at it and hopefully take yourself to that place that you can find connection or hold a conversation, or you know, even Cerisa said, eating a really lovely meal and filling yourself up nutritionally. So hopefully that sort of gut body, mind body is all sort of coming full circle. But yeah, no, I've really appreciated the conversation, and I think it's been really interesting hearing different perspectives across all different areas.
Thank you, Aimee. Thank you so much for that important checklist. We're going to lose Stuart now, so I just want to say thank you so much, Stuart, for being a part of our discussion today. I'm sorry we're losing you straight away. We'll have some last words from Cerisa in a minute. Thank you so much. It's amazing the work that you are doing. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for sharing this beautiful pocket-sized book that you have created. And I wish you all the very best for connecting lives and helping people. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet everyone. Thank you.
Cerisa, I would love to hear your final words as we wrap up today, thoughts of today, but also thoughts forward of Yarning Strong perhaps, and also the through lines, these common threads that we've found in all of these conversations from different places is really interesting.
Yeah, I would say in my final kind of closing words, I would say think about mental health as a holistic thing. So not only do we need to look out for our health, our gut health, our physical health as well, and then we also need to look out for our spiritual health. So whether that's connecting back with nature, or whatever you like to do spiritually, I think it's super important that you get that connection, because more studies are being kind of conducted, and it shows that if you just touch your feet on land, it reduces inflammation. So there's so many things that we can do holistically to look after our mental health, and I think that's a space that we need to come from when we do think about mental health. In terms of kind of the First Nation space, we are at Support Act currently developing a training, and it's called diversity. It's a diversity, equity, and inclusion training, but we are actually reshaping the way that you see a normal DEI initiative. And it's going to be First Nations centered. It's called Voices Amplified. And I think that'll be an amazing training that we are going to provide to the arts community. But basically, within that training, we give a background about mental health, cultural awareness, and how we as Australians can be more inclusive of First Nations people and community, and how we can break down those barriers and how we can connect. And the good thing about this training, I would have to say, is sometimes working with First Nations people and in the First Nations community, there can be vicarious traumas. So there can be traumas that you also pick up on your end. So one thing I think is really good within this training is we acknowledge the other side as well. And we acknowledge how hard and how tough it can be in engaging with First Nations people, but how you can also get through that. And how I think one of the most important thing is not to take it personally, because there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of hurt that comes with the First Nations community. And so when someone does come in and someone does try to help externally, you'll see a lot of that, and some people take that a lot on board. So this is kind of what we work through within our training, and I think it's going to be quite a game changer. I'm really excited. But within the Yarning Strong space as well, we're actually looking at doing it more in person. So we do want to bring community together, and we think that's important. Our next Yarning Strong, if you are in Melbourne, or if you do come to Melbourne, it is on the 2nd of July at the Collingwood Arts Music Yard. And Uncle Kutcha Edwards, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's an amazing performer. He will be doing a performance live there as well, but also we will be celebrating our First Nations elders in music. So if you're in town, please come along. I would love to see you in person.
And that's part of NAIDOC week, I take it. Yeah, awesome. Cerisa, you've said so much. I'm really excited about Amplified Voices, and thank you for reminding us about holistic health and bringing in the idea of the spiritual as well. So thank you for that. Yeah, so many things you've touched on in those final moments. I'm going to do a wrap up now. So I want to really thank Regional Arts New South Wales for presenting this panel, to Dr. Tracy Callanan, OAM, to our esteemed speakers, Cerisa Benjamin, Aimee Davies, Stuart O'Neill, for their incredible words of insight, and also real words of reflection and experience. Thank you to the audience for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you back in July, so stay tuned. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a beautiful afternoon, and stay safe and keep up with your mental health and wellbeing.